Hello, and welcome to the Red Nation Conversation Series. Who tells the story matters. The conversation series is all about representation in all media and where we're at today in the industry in regards to Native Indigenous storytellers. I'm Janelle Romero, and I will be moderating this panel of distinguished guests that I'm so honored and privileged to be in the same room and company, and I'm excited. My dear friend Todd Christensen, and he's one of the industry's leading location managers and member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He has worked on such films as There Will Be Blood, The Hunger Games. How do you say it?
Sicario
1 and 2, and The Battle of Buster Scruggs. Todd has worked on over 30 movies and another 25 scouted. Todd has worked on many of the Pueblos, as well as the Navajo Nation. And our other guest is David. And David, please pronounce your name for me.
Seidler.
Seidler.
It rhymes with idler.
Thank you, David. David Seidler, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It's amazing. His resume is from here to all over. He's a playwright and film and television writer. He's best known for writing the scripts for the stage version and screen version of the story, The King's Speech. For the film, he won Academy Award and a BAFTA for Best Original Screenplay. Welcome, David and Todd. I'm really excited. And I also want to acknowledge that we have our partner with us today, Michael from the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, who has been very, very supportive of our efforts in these virtual screenings and in-person events during Indian Market each year. And they've been extraordinary in help supporting this effort in getting the message out in all media that representation matters and who tells the story matters. Hi, Michael.
Well, thank you. Hi, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Michael.
And we're having, as you know, as we're in this pandemic and this virtual reality that we're all in right now, Michael's has his logo up, but I guarantee you he's a real person. It's not tape. Yeah.
Real.
Yeah. The connection was just not happening today, but we're all here and let's have this conversation. Who tells the story matters, right? And I'd like to open up, David, with you, because before we started recording, you brought up some good news, and I'm very excited to hear this morning. Will you share with us?
Yes, be delighted to. What just came over the internet that Biden has announced through an executive measure that he has instructed about 4 or 5 of the government departments to work together to come up with a cogent plan to improve the justice system and the security of the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, with a particular emphasis on solving the horrendous problem of missing and presumed murdered indigenous women. And this is, only a couple of centuries overdue, but better late than never. And it's a wonderful step forward.
Yes, well, on November 12th, there was a series, and they spoke on the 3 Native women that are still missing in Montana. And it aired on NBC, Peacock, and Oxygen. And they asked me to do an interview and share my story, which I did. And so it's interwoven throughout the series. I haven't seen it yet, but I will over the weekend. But I encourage people to go on and watch the show. And we also launched a call to action called Why We Wear Red with Secretary Deb Haaland back in 2018 in realizing the situation that we're in regards to the lack of Native women in film and television and our missing and murdered Indigenous women, and that direct link. Because if we're not seen and heard, we don't matter. And these, you know, what word can we call them? Horrific people who suppress our voice, and what do you call it? Murderers, you know. Would they need to be held accountable? So for Biden to acknowledge this, at least create this and open that door and have this, our voice and our situations at the table where they're being looked at from the higher ups, right? So that it's not just swept under the carpet anymore. That it's actually, we're actually having dialogues about it today. And hopefully our families can have a resolve, right? For their missing and murdered relatives. That's the goal. And for it to stop. So Todd is a dear friend of many, many years. You've seen Todd with us and heard Todd on many of our panels, and has been very supportive of the Native Indigenous voice throughout Indian country. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Janelle. An honor to be here today.
Both of you, it's extraordinary to have both of you today, because it's really important about this. Who tells the story matters. Representation matters. And where is our Native Indigenous voice in all of this? And to have both of you that I respect so much as our allies in helping us, you know, amplify our storytellers is extraordinary, because there's very few of you. There was Brando, right, at the beginning, really going out there and taking many, many risks and putting his whole career on the line for us, right? So I really want to acknowledge you both, because I understand, you know, I get it. It is can be looked at as a risk, but it can also be looked at as a humanitarian and a proactive step forward in including all of us at the table, because that's who we all are in this country, in this world, in this global community that we're in.
I see it as not a risk, but an obligation.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. That's why we're here.
Yeah. You would be surprised how many conversations I have and people say that it's a risk for their career, right, to speak up. That's why I want to acknowledge both of you for being here, because I know, you know, it could be intense. And Mike, you there?
I am.
Okay, great. What is your take on this? Who tells the story matters?
Well,
You know,
it definitely, of course, it's at the upper echelon of really getting that story out there. It really does matter who shares that, because a lot of our stories and the way we tell, you know, about who we are as Indigenous people is passed on through generations, through our ancestors, and we live it to the best of our abilities in modern day, but we try to hold on to that. So then when we share it with the rest of the world or other tribes, it just comes with so much validation and authenticity that's why who tells the story matters.
David, being an ally to our story today, what and you saying that it's an obligation. What makes you feel that way?
The risk is not doing it, because if we ignore your stories, your wisdom, your experiences, your mistakes, we are losing a heritage that we need desperately. I don't think there's any doubt that many people who are aware today see that our society is heading for disaster. We may even exterminate ourselves at the rate we're going. If anybody is going to survive, by the way, it's probably the indigenous people who still have the skills and the knowledge to live if what we call civilization collapses. You will still know how to live out there. We won't. So things are out of balance. Our world is out of balance in many ways. Male energy dominates. Female energy has been suppressed. It needs to come up so it's in balance. There are many things that are out of balance. So it is really a very risky proposition not to include you, is my feeling about it. If I may, can I give an example from my own career?
Absolutely, absolutely.
This is more, don't do as I do, but do as I say. About 40 years ago plus, I was commissioned by CBS to do what was then called a miniseries, which then was a two-nighter, which was something they liked back then. You don't hear about it now. To do a two-part miniseries on Edward Sheriff Curtis, the photographer of indigenous people in North America. Visions of a Vanishing Race. His story is a really wonderful story, very dramatic. He gave up a career of being the most successful and fashionable society photographer in America. Teddy Roosevelt brought him to Washington, D.C. to photograph the wedding of his beloved daughter, Alice. And he gave all of that up, including his marriage, to spend 30 years going around and trying to capture images of what he called and thought then was a vanishing race, because your people were vanishing. The diseases that Western man had brought in, the fact that your protein herds had been deliberately massacred and shot and left to rot, so you had no food. All of that meant that you were disappearing, which, by the way, the same thing happened in New Zealand. The Maori there were considered a vanishing race, and then they had the temerity of surviving and flourishing ultimately. So what did I do as a non-woke person of 40-some years ago? I wrote the Edward Sheriff Curtis story. Fascinating story. There's only one trouble. The indigenous people were simply ornaments in this story. Yeah, he was photographing them. He's taking great pictures. But how did they feel about this?
Right.
How did they feel about being called a vanishing race? How did they feel about this man showing up with these strange boxes that their shaman warned them might possibly steal their souls? Because that was the feeling,
Mhm.
quite understandably so. How is it that he managed to go from tribe to tribe and not get himself killed? But he was actually welcome. So something was going on. There was a dialogue that I completely ignored because, well, no, you tell the white guy's story. So now I want to resurrect that. Script never got made. It was in pre-production when NBC beat us to the punch and did a mini-series based on a terrible pulp novel. I think it was called Tonta Ho or something like that. It was just dreadful. Did very badly. And so in great Hollywood wisdom, word went out, Indians don't work. And so there were no Indians for another 30, 40 years. That's the way Hollywood works. I remember a Western did badly, and so word went out, dust doesn't work. So you could never have a script with the word dust in it. Otherwise, it would never get made. I mean, it's crazy stuff. When I say it, it sounds absurd, but that is the way our industry works. So I've decided that one of the things I'm going to do when I get a bit of a break in time is to try to resurrect the Edward Sheriff Curtis story. But I'm not going to do it like I did it last time. And what I want to do is to gather a small group of Indigenous writers, and we write it as a cooperative.
Mhm.
I want to get their point of view. Hopefully, some of them have grandparents or great-grandparents who told stories about when this strange, handsome, bearded gringo came across the plains with these strange boxes and asked them to put on some of the old clothing. And I mean, he's been criticized, of course, that he didn't take pictures verite, that he arranged his photographs. He had the people wear their garments that had been put away for safekeeping, put them on, pose them. But he didn't want to take photographs of people in torn jeans sitting in front of the trading post. He wanted to capture a vision before it disappeared completely, as the thought was, what were they in their prime? Okay, so hopefully I'll find some co-writers who will have stories and have some knowledge of it. I got this idea several years ago when I'm kind of deeply embedded in the Maori communities of New Zealand. I was married to a Maori for quite a while. I have a son who is half Maori, and my dearest friend in the world is a Maori there, a man by the name of DJ Joe. So I got it through my head. I wanted to do something about the Maori Battalion in World War II, which was the most feared Allied unit in the war. Rommel, the great German general, complained bitterly to Eisenhower that the Maoris were war criminals, but to his own generals, he said, "Give me the Maori Battalion and I can conquer the world." I mean, they were amazing, amazing warriors. So I wanted to do something on it, but I knew perfectly well by then that if I came as a gringo from Hollywood and wanted to write about this gem of Maori history, it would not be received very kindly, and for good reason. So I got the idea of doing this Maori style, communal. And we gathered together about 8 of the top film writers, Maori film writers in New Zealand. We went up to DJ's place up in the hills, and we hung out there together and ate a lot of good food and drank a lot of good whiskey for a week. And we collaboratively put this together. And the way I structured it was the writing credit would be the Maori Writers Cooperative, we called ourselves, list all of our names in alphabetical order, and we would split whatever money we got equally amongst us. We got some very good work done. Unfortunately, it never got made because when we presented it to networks in England and in America, they all said, yeah, well, this is great stuff, but where is the American star? Or where is the English star? If you can get rock to play a Maori, maybe we'll think of doing it.
Right.
But it gave me the idea that that is maybe the way to work
Mm.
as a non-Indigenous writer who is attracted deeply to a Indigenous story. I don't think I have the right to just plunge right in. I need input. And so to do it as a communal effort seemed to be
Right.
the way.
Yeah. Well, you bring up some really good points. The NBC was ABC, and the miniseries. It's so funny because we don't use the word miniseries anymore. And I think what they use now is limited series.
Yes.
But stating us both.
I'm so dated, it doesn't make any difference.
I know. Well, the thing with that was it was ABC was called Mystic Warrior. And yeah, it ended up being called Mystic Warrior. I believe that's the one you're speaking of. And I co-starred in that miniseries. They had me up for the lead for many, many years as it was in, pre-production. And then they ended up casting an Irish actress for the lead and giving me the co-star to play her sister. And they dyed her hair black and they put brown contacts in her eyes. And they cast Robert Beltran as the lead. And they had, Will Sampson. Will Sampson was supposed to play the medicine man, and they ended up casting an Italian guy. And so Will and I would be on the set, and he would just say, take the money and do something fabulous. That was his share to me. And I did. I went and I recorded my first record, took the money and recorded a record, the 45. I was so proud of it. And I miss Will Sampson's voice because he was also a trailblazer and a leader in our community, and, Cuckoo's Nest, who can, that was the best. But it's very interesting because we're at a place in our industry where our voice has been so suppressed for so many years that we also have the other side in our community of who's saying who's Indian and who's not. And for the ones that haven't really done anything to try to get the upper hand on getting the gig versus the people that have been doing the work for ages. And it's just this, it's very complicated. But one of the things that our institute, Red Nation Celebration Institute, continues to try to move forward is bringing the bigger circle into this dialogue, so that we are actually being held accountable and we can have these dialogues in the open and not behind closed doors, so that we can all educate each other, because our Native Indigenous peoples are of the many different nations and many different tribes. There's very few that are still alive today that are full blood. There's many Pueblo relatives that are, and there's a few Plains, but it's very rare these days. So it's really an emergency to be very inclusive.
By the way, the same thing exists in New Zealand with Maori. there are very, very, very few full-blooded Maori
Mm.
left. The last one I ever met was my mother-in-law there when I was married to a Maori. But and of course, they now have a lot of people say, well, particularly now that the iwis, the tribes, are getting a lot of money from a re-looking at the Treaty of Waitangi, which was a great fraud by the British colonial governments. They get money. And so a lot of people are showing up and say, well, I'm Maori, I want my share.
Right.
And they're dealing with it in a very simple and effective way. They say, recite your genealogy.
Right.
And if they can't recite their genealogy, they're not Maori.
Exactly. If you can't trace the name exactly. Todd, I'd like to ask you, you worked with, you have a son that's native from our family in Taos. And, you've worked with so many Pueblos in the state of New Mexico, and you're now working along with LMGI and Red Nation Crew to get more of our Indigenous people behind the camera involved in films. Can you speak on that and your experiences?
Yeah, well, I started out as an artist, and then became a Teamster location manager. And when LMGI started to form in Los Angeles, I was one of the original members. So I've been with them from the get-go. They're partnering, you called me last year to do a masterclass in locations, and then by a series of circumstances, Kristen with LMGI, they wanted to do more outreach. At the same time, I got into the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and they wanted me to help with their educational system to get more indigenous, information about how do we do that reach out, because they've been doing reach out to the Black and Brown communities, but not the Native community. And so that was all new. And my part is, like, I've been a successful location manager, and I have done great movies. I've learned a great deal from the job, from the people I originally worked with to the people that I started, the producers and directors that I joined on their shows. And what I want to piggyback on is what David was talking about and what you've been talking about, which is, where does somebody like me fit into this? And the way I fit in is, like, I need somebody like David to write the script, so, and then David's inclusion of, trying to find indigenous people, which is, he's an accomplished writer. He not only is looking for that inclusion, but also as a teacher, in that inclusion because of his history of writing. Mine is, I have a history of providing the locations for the visual story. So when I read a script by David, I visually see the script, and then I start to look at how I find that. And that's how I found myself on some of the Pueblos in our native lands and filmed in those places, because I knew what it looked like. I knew that I had, I had relationships, and I could form relationships. So my part is that I also want to do a collaborative, it's with the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, with LMGI, with Red Nation, to give back my skills so that natives can help that visual story that needs a writer like David, or those visual stories that might be written by the neighbor to that person I'm training to be a location scout and manager. And so this step forward, I need David to write the script. David needs me to be able to visualize the script so that when it comes onto the screen, that it looks as fabulous as he saw it when he wrote it. And that's my part. And that's what I want to try to give back in order to, I believe I'm a major part of storytelling. I'm a major representative of a crew member who helps tell the story. And so what I want to do is to train our native people wherever to be able to read a script, how you break down a script and how you find the locations, and that some of those people will become writers. Some of those people will become directors.
Mhm.
Some of them will become cinematographers, because I just want to open the door. And it's also something that David has spoke about, and you've been talking about forever, Janelle, is like opening the door to the creativity and the storytelling that has existed for centuries,
Yeah.
in our Native community, that I want to be a conduit to that. And I think that's what David is speaking to as well.
Yeah, you bring up some good points, because while you were sharing, I was thinking about, there's okay, so Red Nation Celebration, Red Nation International Film Festival has become the largest Native film festival in the country. But I also want to give credit, because credit due to Mike Smith in San Francisco, because he's the one that first had the vision to have a Native film festival over 40 years ago, right? And there's other festivals, Native festivals across the country, but the difference, I believe, how our festival is different than those festivals is what you just brought up, Todd, is that we include our allies that are storytellers. And last night at our award show, we gave a humanitarian award to Josh and Rebecca Tickle, who did Kiss the Ground, Revelation Generation, Fuel, right? They've made gorgeous, amazing educational, they are educational, but gorgeous documentaries about our Indigenous scientists, right? So, there's a lot to be said about collaborations. And I feel very strongly about that, because it's a foundation of partnerships. That's why one of our biggest foundation is to partner with other organizations, and to have that a huge reach, so that, because we're all here together now, there's one thing that we all have in common, is our blood. Our blood is red. Even our animals. That's the one thing that we all have in common, right? So if we could get to that core of that, then I have hope that we can make and create incredible stories.
And I think
it's not about ownership, and it's not about that. It's about creating stories that enrich and empower not only all people, but our Native Indigenous youth, because they have been so suppressed.
And I think that part, which has been happening at Red Nation with the film festival, and there's been film festivals at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, is to find a way to partner with these production companies to get these things. I think they should be in the mainstream for decades now. They should be on television, in movie theaters, and it's this perception that's given, whether it's a big actor or director or money or whatever it is, rather than just having people witness the story, and
experience.
I think that's a wall that needs to be knocked down.
Well, I'll give you an example. Last night, who picked up all the awards at our ceremony was Night Raiders. I encourage everyone to see that film. That film, it's okay. We'll wait, David. Okay, that film should be considered a top 10 film. And I don't know why it's not for this year. They pick the top 10 films of the year, how our, media, our industry, that film needs to be a top 10 film. It is so good. And another film, Wild Indian. Oh my God, what a story. Shosuke Spencer in that is, oh. And Michael Gray Eyes, he picked up Best Actor last night. I mean, yeah, there's so many rich stories. And we have content. We don't have a lack of content. We have content for the next billion years. We have so many stories.
A lot of it is changed. By the way, just a little technical question. When you speak and when Todd speaks, you get a lime thing around your picture. I wonder if I'm being recorded visually. Nothing happens.
Yeah, we can see the line around you.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. I just don't want to be left out, you know.
Not left out.
Uh,
Not on my watch.
there is a lot of it is attitudinal shifts that are going to have to take place within the higher rankings of the industry. A classic example of this is Reservation Dogs, okay? Who got Reservation Dogs? Made Taika Waititi,
Yes.
a Maori.
Yes.
A Maori who, by the way, was part of the Maori Battalion collective. He was part of that group.
Not only that, he's executive producer on Night Raiders.
Why wasn't that show originated by an indigenous writer? Why did he got it made? Because he makes the studios lots and lots of money. So yeah, Taika wants to do it, we'll put it on. But if Joe Blogg from the Taos Reservation showed up and said, "Oh, I've got this great idea about, you know, the kids who live on the reservation," they say, yeah, we've got something like that in development, and, you know, give them the normal push away. Really, attitudes have to be changed.
David, I'm going to share with you something. In 1996, I had an idea and I acted like I had $1 million. I had $1,000. And we went up to Taos, we wrote a script, and we shot the first all native drama series. And Wanda was in it, Todd, and the mother to Todd's child. And, Elaine Miles was in it. Everyone got there on their own dime. You know, we got everyone to donate down to the bagels and donuts in the morning, and we shot it. And I went, into all these meetings, to Spielberg's office, to this office, to David Walper's office, to everyone saying, here's a drama series. Here's the first all native drama. I was like, yes, this is very doable. Spielberg's office told me, "You're so ahead of your time. It'll be about another 25 years. This is the 25-year mark around right now, right?" And so we're re-pitching that. The pilot you can see on rednationtv.com. It's a woman attorney who goes back home to deal with the murdered and Indigenous women issue and a bunch of other issues. Yeah, I tried. I'm trying right now.
Attitudes change. About 30 years ago, I wrote a script about the first woman to sail around the world single-handedly. And I got a letter from the head of a studio. I won't say which one or who he was. The letter said, "We love your script. It is fantastic. But neither we nor any other studio in Hollywood make female-driven vehicles."
I want to know who that is, David. I want to go. If that person's alive, I'm going to go in there.
He's alive.
Okay, later.
Things have changed. things, at least that has changed. So the next step is, things, you just have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Yeah. The thing is that I ride with Geronimo and Crazy Horse, so there's no stopping me, that is for sure. And all of my grandmas. I'm here to stay. And the work that we do here at the Institute is to encourage all of our other relatives and our storytellers to move forward and live their dream, because we're doing it.
Yeah, and it's being done, and also the Indian Pueblo, Michael can maybe speak to this, but the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in New Mexico is leading that charge. I mean,
Yes.
they are really wanting to develop the writers, the crew members, the cinematographers, et cetera, to be able to put forward for any of these studios, or, however it can be done. So,
Yeah, thank
Michael?
you for that, Todd. Here, I'm gonna, looks like my internet connection kind of somewhat improved. I'm gonna turn on my camera for a little bit while I share a few
Okay.
things.
hey,
There
Michael.
you are.
He has a face.
Yes.
Am I here? Am I on screen?
You're here.
I can't-
You're here,
Yes.
Michael.
All right. Thank you, Todd. So yes, us here at the Indian Public Culture Center, we are seeing that it is a need to really bridge the gap between, Hollywood and with indigenous communities. And one of our, I think, greatest assets, is we are the gateway to the 19 pueblos of New Mexico. New Mexico, of course, indigenous land is just everywhere. And, we don't just support the 19 pueblos of New Mexico. We also support our indigenous neighbors, with the Navajo Nation and our Apache communities as well. And so, throughout the year when we host our events, they're our biggest crowd that is usually here. And now that we're going towards, helping our daily artisans, this type of medium fits into that as well. We want to be able to, again, showcase indigenous people in this platform and be able to help them sort of get in the door. And trust me, there's so many, story writers or indigenous Pueblo people already making, films, mini films, and, their voice is there. It's just not being heard. And we just really want to support them on their endeavors and really find a good place to bring all of it together, behind the scenes, on the set, what's going on in front of the camera and back of the camera, and just really open the doors for indigenous communities and professionals and, amateurs to be able to come together and really put something authentic together.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's exciting to have this partnership with you, Michael, because it's collaborative, like David was sharing about. It's a collective, really, really important moving forward. Well, we're just about 50 minutes in. And I just want to wrap this conversation up. It's been extraordinary, and who tells a story matters. So, would you three like to just touch on as a wrap up your thoughts about what you're doing today in helping amplify our Native Indigenous storytellers?
I'll start. I'm here talking to you, and hopefully there's a lot of people that will hear what we're talking about. But I think the part that I can play in this is to try to encourage and try to be a conduit to that telling of the story. Location managers work closely with the director and the production designer, and without the writer being there with the writer, because the first thing I get is a script. And then I break down a script. So I want to show people how to break down scripts. And when I say people, I mean our indigenous people. That's who I'm most concerned with about teaching this. And once people start reading the scripts, maybe they start to see that maybe they're a storyteller. Oh, I can do this. And that's what I want to hear in the way that I, would go to various places. I want to start at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center or on Zoom or right here, the class that we did last year, to try to impart.
Yeah, we'll do some more of those.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Cool.
Well, currently, not only am I planning to do the Curtis story as a collaborative effort, but another project that I'm working on trying to put together is something I'm calling Macbeth 2300. And it is a retelling of the Macbeth story set in a future in the year 2300, where climate change and a series of pandemics that make COVID look like chickenpox have decimated the population. Civilization has come crashing down, the economies have crashed down. And the only survivors in this part of North America are, ironically, the indigenous people, for two reasons. One, that they know how to survive, and two, just as a little thing I've made up, that the DNA quirk that has made indigenous people victims to alcohol and sugar for centuries, that same DNA quirk makes them survive the last pandemics. And so there. And of course, the most valuable commodity is water. So there is the fights for water. The Pueblos here around Santa Fe have water because of the mountains and the snowfall, and they know how to store it and catch it. But there are Plains Indians from the Midwest who don't have water, who are making raids. So history repeats itself. The Taos Pueblo makes a pact with the Apaches. The Apaches are the first line of defense, as it were. And the Macbeth figure is the war chief of the Apaches. And he has a very ambitious wife. And she says, you know, you're the war chief, but you should be the chief. And he starts down the slippery slope into evil, as in other words, all the emotional beats of Shakespeare's Macbeth are going to be followed exactly. The language will be simplified and modernized. You don't want indigenous people riding around the plains spouting Elizabethan English. It just doesn't make any sense. But really what the message is that the emotions are the same. The emotions of indigenous people are the same as the emotions that existed in Shakespearean England. And that's another way of saying, hey, like you said, we all bleed the same color. You know, just because we kind of lack pigmentation doesn't make us superior.
And that's also what Black Elk said when he came down from the mountain. We are all human beings.
Yeah, exactly. So my only last comment on this subject today is, if Hitler had won the war, do you think a movie like Schindler's List would ever be told? That's the problem.
Yeah.
The victor writes history. The victor tells the stories. And we have to reach a point in our civilization where being the victor does not give you that privilege, where there are no victors, where we learn, God knows how we've lost the ability to do it, where we learn to work together. Can you really believe that a species faced with threats to survival, such as COVID or even more threatening global warming, don't work together? That's insane. You'd say, what a stupid bunch of squirrels or dumb beavers. Well, we're dumb beavers. We're stupid squirrels. And that has to change.
Well said. Mike? I know I go back from Mike to Michael, so.
It's quite all right. All right. So, I think what I will end with, well, let's see, vacuum just came on in the hallway, so let me shut my door.
Oh, okay.
He's just gonna shut his door and come back.
I know. I was just gonna say the vacuum rules today.
Yeah, right.
Well, this has been a gorgeous conversation, and I know our viewing audience today at 3 will you know, love it. Michael?
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Our wonderful custodial team came by and started vacuuming just outside my door, but no, things happen. What I wanted to kind of share is, you know, along the lines with what both Todd and David had to say, but it's really, you know, in the world we are currently, you know, taking down barriers and overcoming obstacles and really getting to the point where our voices are being heard. And there's plenty more to say. And, you know, we are changing how the world has had their perception of Indigenous people. And to, you know, to David's point, you know, with Victor sort of writing some of the history on that, you know, their storytelling comes from all avenues. And when we articulate that, we need to know, people need to know that our voice is loud, it's powerful. And as we continue to take down these barriers, that who we are as Indigenous people, that will become more vivid, more colorful for the world to see who we are, you know, and there is that change that is coming, and rightfully so, you know, and that is, you know, an attribute to our surviving ability, our resilienceness. And, you know, those that are out there inspiring to be writers or, you know, get into this industry, you know, your time is now.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good way to segue, Michael. And I want to thank all of you, Todd, David, Michael, for joining this conversation. Who tells the story matters. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.